Welcome back, dear viewers. Thank you so much for staying with us. You're still watching the breakfast show live on Nile TV International, and now it's time for our press review. And before we go into details, we're going to be extending our deepest condolences to the French people over the recent deadly attacks that took place last night in Paris, and to shed more light on the headlines of today. We're most delighted to be joined by Dr. Hala Enara. She's a political analyst and commentator. First of all, good morning, doctor, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Doctor, before we dig into the headlines, we'd like to express our deep sorrow and condolences to the victims of the Paris terrorist attacks. And for the latest news regarding the attacks which took place on night, 120 dead in Paris attacks. Doctor, before we look or shed more light into this incident, we're going to be taking a look at this report, and we'll be back to resume the press review.
Gunmen and bombers attacked restaurants, a concert hall and a sports stadium at locations across Paris on Friday, killing at least 120 people in a deadly rampage that a shaken President François Hollande called an unprecedented terrorist attack. Officials said 4 gunmen dramatically slaughtered at least 87 young people attending a rock concert at the Bataclan Music Hall. Anti-terrorist commandos eventually launched an assault on the building. The gunmen detonated explosive belts, and dozens of shocked survivors were rescued. Some 40 more people were killed in 5 other attacks in the Paris region, including an apparent double bombing outside the National Stadium where Hollande and the German foreign minister were watching a friendly soccer international. The coordinated assault came as France, a founder member of the US-led coalition waging airstrikes against Daesh in Syria and Iraq, was on high alert for terrorist attacks ahead of a global climate conference due to open later this month. Paris public prosecutors said the death toll was at least 120. He added that 5 gunmen had been killed. After being whisked from the soccer stadium near the blasts, Hollande declared a nationwide state of emergency, the first since the end of World War II, and the closure of France's borders to stop perpetrators escaping. The Paris Metro Railway was closed, and schools, universities, and municipal buildings were ordered to stay shut on Saturday. However, some rail and air services are expected to run. All emergency services were mobilized. Police leave was cancelled. 1,500 army reinforcements were drafted into the Paris region, and hospitals recalled staff to cope with the casualties. It was unclear whether any gunmen were still on the loose. Radio stations broadcast warnings to residents to stay home and leave the streets, and urged residents to give shelter to anyone caught out in the street. The deadliest attack was on the Bataclan, a popular concert venue, where the Californian rock group Eagles of Death Metal was performing. France has been on high alert ever since the attacks on the Charlie Hebdo newspaper and a supermarket in Paris in January killed 18 people.
Welcome back, dear viewers. We're still shedding light on the latest incidents that took place in Paris last night. And the ramifications. President Hollande says France will be merciless, and Hollande declares emergency. Hollande, Obama vow to reinforce counter-terrorism efforts. In Paris, China's Xi Jinping says willing to join France in combating terrorism. Of course, the EU and the NATO chiefs deeply shocked by attacks in Paris. It is the worst since World War II. Doctor, if you can tell us the significance of these events and its repercussions on the international scene.
In fact, this proves that creating a demon will hurt everyone. The demon of terrorism. Terrorists are supported by some Western countries, not France, in fact. And they are attacking everywhere. They are wreaking havoc in Syria, in Iraq, Egypt.
Libya, Yemen.
Libya, of course. Libya has become a base for them, and Yemen. And the West has been thinking that they are very far from the effect of such terrorism. But they are not far. They are not far at all. That's like the United States in World War II that was looking from outside and saying that we are very far from the war until they were hit. This demon does not differentiate between West and East. They have no respect for human life anywhere in the world. And they already had previous attacks in Madrid, in London, and in Paris. And that proved that they are targeting every nation, country, not only Arab and Muslim countries, but that didn't stop some Western countries and some Western quarters from defending them, claiming that they have human rights, even if they were, they have verdicts saying that they are killers and they killed people, and it was proved that they killed people. They found huge in Western countries. Maybe what happened yesterday will drive Western countries to rethink and modify their...
In the news, we heard about Hollande and Obama vowing to reinforce counterterrorism. Do you believe that they will succeed?
I believe Hollande that he's going to do something about Obama and the United States, who is supporting terrorists. Who created Al-Qaeda, who created ISIS, who brought ISIS to Iraq, who brought ISIS to Syria, who dropped armies to ISIS and said, oops, it's by mistake. It's the United States. Who are they kidding? They cannot kid Arabs, they cannot kid Muslims, and even American newspapers say that CIA is supporting some terrorists in Syria and they call them freedom fighters. Until when? They will keep fooling the whole world. Until now, they are not hurt, but there's nothing sure that they are safe. They may be hurt the same way France was hurt, and Arab countries were hurt. And Egypt, in its fight against terrorism, they are fighting Egypt. Egypt is fighting terrorism alone. No one is helping Egypt in its fight against terrorists. And all the time, attacking Egypt and saying, until now, Western countries say that June 30 coup d'etat. They don't say that this is a popular revolution. People revolted against the so-called Islamic rulers. They are not Islamic at all. And they don't confess that there was a problem with these people. They know nothing about democracy. They use democracy to rule. And when they reach, they don't pay any attention to democracy. They kill people and they deprive them from their basic rights. And they adopt violence. Everywhere they prove that. What is the West waiting for? Don't they know? Don't the intelligence agency know about their movements and about their ideas? Are they kidding themselves until they are killed themselves?
Dear viewers, several reactions that poured in following this attack, deadly attack that took place in Paris last night. We have a report following up on the international reactions to this incident. Let's take a look and we'll be back to resume the press review.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, U.S. President Barack Obama, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel led a global course of solidarity with France. This as UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon condemned the deadliest attacks. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker and NATO head Jens Stoltenberg Both said they were deeply shocked by the attacks in Paris on Friday that have left at least 120 people dead. European Council President Donald Tusk said that he will ensure the G20 summit in Turkey over the weekend will respond to the of terrorism, as both he and Juncker prepared to represent the European Union at the event. In a later message to French President François Hollande, Juncker, the former Prime Minister of Luxembourg, said he was revolted to see that France is at this same moment hit by terrorism. Other members of the European Commission, the executive arm of the 28 European Union in Brussels, have also reacted to the attacks. EU Foreign Policy Chief, also writing in French, tweeted that she is in the process of following with pain and dread the events in Paris. Tusk wrote to Hollande saying that France will not be alone in its fight against terrorism, as the attacks were an outrage against not just France but all of Europe.
Welcome back, dear viewers. Thank you so much for staying with us. And we move on now to Ahram's front page, and we read, Russia suspends receiving the flights of the national carrier, EgyptAir. The foreign ministry adopts a campaign to
plan to hit the tourism sector, following the participation of a team from London in the inspection of planes a month ago. A source says the British ambassador praised the security measures in both the airports of Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh, and Zind leads a judiciary delegation to support tourism in Sharm el-Sheikh. And dear viewers, still with the same issue, which made the main banner of in the Masri Al-Yawm, we read, EgyptAir, a new victim to the doomed Russian plane. Russia suspends receiving the flights of the national carrier, and the Minister of Civil Aviation says, we have not been officially notified. Russia's state aviation agency on Friday banned Egypt's national carrier from flying to Russia. Doctor, if you can tell us the significance of this decision, and I believe it's inexplicable, and as the Egyptian officials have said, they were not notified, and if you can tell us also the impact, the possible impact of this decision on the tourism sector.
In fact, this incident of targeting a Russian plane, especially over Sinai, was targeting Russia and Egypt at the same time. They wanted to hit Egypt in its war against terrorism. They wanted to hit tourism as main resource of income for Egypt. They wanted to hurt Egyptian economy. At the same time, they wanted to hit Russia, who is fighting Daesh, ISIS in Syria, and who exposed the Western alliance, who has been saying that we are fighting terrorism in Syria and doing nothing for quite some time. And just in a week, Russia has achievements in fighting this ISIS. They wanted to hurt Russia and hurt Egypt at the same time. But if Russia stops EgyptAir and stops Russian tourists, maybe they have a right, because they had many victims.
And
they want
until,
to examine what happened.
Yes, at least until solid,
to know the truth. Yes.
solid findings come out.
But they are threatened, because today, maybe you read the newspaper, ISIS says that we are going to the Kremlin, we are going to enslave Russian women and children, we are going to kill them, we are going to regain parts of the former Soviet Union to be Islamic. They are threatening Russia, and they have every right to defend themselves. But what about England, who stopped tourists? Tourists at the same moment when this incident happened, did they know anything yet? No. Did the investigation committee didn't release any information about what happened yet? Yet no, what happened? What really happened? Is it a bomb, or is it? But there is something very important today in Akhbar al-Yawm. One of the Egyptian pilots said that if there was a bomb on this plane, the people who did that were helped by foreign intelligence service. They cannot do this by themselves. That's the same thing that after September 11 attacks.
Yes, and I believe in this regard, the head of the investigation, the Egyptian investigation team, said that the black box recording has been sent abroad for further examination.
They need the technology.
Yes.
That is not...
Moving on and back to where we read more news from its front page. A shock in Lebanon after the twin blasts of Burj el Baragna, yes. Egypt calls on the Lebanese to unite, and the world supports Beirut in the face of terrorism. Lebanese Prime Minister Tamim Salem holds an emergency meeting with his security cabinet and military chiefs as the nation mourned 44 people killed in a suicide bombing claimed by Daesh. And still with the same issue, but from Masri Lyoum with one of its main banners as well. Lebanon wears the costume of mourning over the victims and the setback for Daesh in Iraq. And American raid targets John the Killer. And Kerry says the days of the group is limited. Iraqi Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani announced the liberation of the town of from the Daesh group on Friday, the latest in a series of setbacks for the militants. The operation was led by the autonomous Kurdish region's Peshmerga forces, but also involved fighters from the Yazidi minority, which Daesh targeted in a brutal campaign. Another incident, Doctor, and the activity of Daesh continues, not only in Europe, but also in the Middle East and in Lebanon.
Yes, and another face of terrorism. Terrorism is leading many countries to wear black. Today, France is in black. Yesterday, it was Lebanon in black. Before that, it was in Egypt and in Russia.
Yes.
And every we hear about tens of people killed in Iraq. And many people are killed in Syria. Nearly half the population of Syria has immigrated from their country. They left their country because they can't live there. They are always threatened. They are always attacked. They don't have any security. They are not safe in their own country. And some Western circles say that it is democracy. We must remove this regime and bring another regime as if we are, it is a game. They don't care for human lives. Millions of people immigrate. Millions of people are displaced. Millions of people are threatened. They cannot live. They cannot lead a normal life. And there must be an international attitude, international unified attitude against terrorists. Just today morning, there was a Qatari professor talking on France 24, and he said that the problem is they must have a solution for the Middle East and Syria. Who is helping and who is giving resources to terrorists in Syria and in Iraq? Who is saying that we must remove al-Assad? Though many millions of Syrians say they were more safe under Assad. And they are not safe at all now. They don't have a life at all. And they keep talking. There must be a drying of resources for terrorists because they hit everywhere. They hit in the Arab world, they hit in Europe, they hit everywhere when they can. Everyone in the world must feel that he is threatened by these people. No one is far from them, from their threats.
Unfortunately, Doctor, we're running out of time, but really do appreciate your insight. Dr. Hala Enara, a political analyst and commentator, thank you so much for joining us on The Breakfast Show.
You're welcome.
And dear viewers, a short break, and then we'll be back to resume the remaining segments of The Breakfast Show live on Nile TV International.